Welcome to the Straight Red Card, and I would say it's cocktail hour because it is for us. But some of you may actually be using cocktail hour in a different way today after that 2-1 loss between the United States and Honduras, kicking us essentially out of the Olympics. Not essentially, it kicked us out of the Olympics. Yeah, it's over. And I thought, smoke was coming out of Alexi's ears after the after game report, and he was really upset. You could tell, he tried to end his little comment by saying, well, now we got to move forward. Well, that's just an easy thing to say. The fact is, we didn't play very well. And I guess, what does this mean going forward, missing the Olympics, Brett? I mean, we've been missing it for so long. I almost seems like that's normal now. I don't know if there's a big change because we missed it again.
Yeah, it's one of those questions. For our standpoint, we talked about this before the World Cup Olympic qualifying started. Whether or not it's an important feat to actually qualify and go to the Olympics. Now, it's great to qualify, and when to stay plain and simple, it's not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world as far as building fan. It's not the end of the world as far as building fan base, but it would have been nice for the players.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say. I was going to follow that up with.
Yeah,
when we're looking at our summer schedule, and you throw the Olympics in there, I still don't know if we would necessarily see a full, U23 top team there. I think we'd see a lot of these players sprinkled in with a handful of non-consistent starters, I guess, for the national team.
Yeah.
But, it would have been great for their development just to get more competitive games in there because obviously we're looking at a U23 team that's going to be filling in the spots over the course of the next cycle or two.
Yeah.
Unless other people fill in. But I'm saying that these players will be filling in and called upon, So it would have been great if they got more competitive play. But, again, I'm just saying it's not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world. Yes, it sucks. I don't like losing. It would have been nice to at least have the opportunity. But as you said, the schedule coming up with Nations League, qualifiers, Gold Cup, some of these young guys are going to get another chance to play because Pulisic, McKennie, and Adams and all those big guys in Europe, they are not playing all of those games. They can't.
No.
It's physically impossible for them to do that. So, some of these other guys are going to have to step up when it comes to Nations League, maybe, or
just throwing in the qualifiers. I mean, you're looking at 15 games and five windows.
Yeah,
so, I mean, you're looking at back games,
and
you're going to have to rely on the depth. And again, like you said, our normal starting 11 won't start and play every single game.
Yeah, and then there were people on Twitter and there were people on other social media today going, well, this is just stupid. Why didn't Pulisic and McKennie and Adams play for the Olympic team today? Because that's just not going to happen. First of all, the Olympic qualifiers are not really official FIFA window yes. And second of all, the clubs don't want to release Pulisic to go play in an Olympic qualifier. No, the Olympics mean nothing to most of these clubs and these teams, and they're not risking that. Now, okay, they did release him for the U.S. men's national team. But again, our federation wouldn't even call up those guys. They know better to call up those guys for the Olympics. So I think the outrage is just based on simple ignorance, mostly. If you really think that those guys should be playing in the Olympic qualifiers. This team we had was good enough to get the job done. They just didn't do it.
Yeah, it was a tale of two halves in that first half. First half plus a couple minutes, I guess, just cost it. A couple of blunders mixed in with some poor play, but then second half was better. There are a couple players
except for Ochoa's second half.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm taking that 2-minute spell, that first the beginning of the second half, and just lumping in with the first half.
I mean, really, I feel bad for him. I really do.
Play the easy ball next time.
And then, well, he chunked one after that too.
Yeah, it wasn't his best game. He still made some clinical saves. Nothing overly testing him. There were some well driven balls straight at him. But I mean, those blunders are going to be what's going to be talked about.
Yeah, and Mexican national team fans can maybe chime in on this. I noticed that Ochoa, whenever he touched the ball, got booed. Booed. Is that because he's a dual national that could play for Mexico and to pick the United States? I'm curious as to why the boos in the Mexican stadium every time Ochoa touched the ball. I mean, I thought maybe it was sort of random before, but no, it's happened for 3 games in a row. So this is not random. He's getting booed on purpose. Or I guess that's the 3rd game he played, right? Or was it the 2nd? Maybe it was only 2 games that I noticed it. So just curious about that. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, Ochoa had a pretty good game. He's known for having pretty decent feet. So I'm going to just chalk that up to nervousness or losing focus, being as young as he is, who knows, being a little too nonchalant in both cases, I think. It could have been 3-0. Brett, and it could have been 4-1 this game, actually, based on Ochoa's second chunker. Mm-hmm. So,
to answer your question, Ochoa is definitely a dual national. He was called into, I think it was I quickly did a search on this, but he was called into the Mexican U16s and then ended up opting to play for the United States. There has to be something else more to that, why he was constantly getting booed, because I can't imagine that being the only reason. But
I think in some article I read, he said, I feel more American than Mexican or something like that. It was lost in translation when I read it. It was written in Spanish. So it might have been translated poorly, but that's what it sounded like, what his response to one of the questions were. And maybe that they've taken that comment and kind of, they want to stick it to him. But they don't stick it to Soto, and Soto, I believe, is qualified to play for Mexico. They didn't seem to stick it to Saucedo again.
Chilean.
I believe he can play for Mexico too.
Oh, okay. Taking away the first half and pretending it didn't occur. Who had a good game?
Well, that's a good question. You know who stood out to me, and it wasn't many.
Obvious.
Yule.
Yeah, obvious.
Single-handedly tried to bring us back in that game.
Not only did he nearly bring us back, but he almost. I mean, if he had two chances that required solid saves.
Yep, he did.
He could have literally brought it back and won it if just happened to be a couple inches away another direction. But
yeah. And the other guy, Tessman, I thought he came off the bench and was a firecracker.
That's the bigger question as far as why he didn't play more, because he clearly had more of an offensive mind than having Yule and Pereira in there at the same time.
Yeah.
It just they just sort of countered each other out in that first half.
I think what happened was, as you remember, Tessman was a late fill-in.
Yeah.
And I think people think he's a good player, but in actuality, I think he's a lot better than we think he is. I think he's getting better and better and better, and I think it's happening at such a rapid rate, it's hard to keep track of, which was why he went from a fill-in to the guy coming off the bench today to make a spark. And I think that the U.S. soccer officials and assistant coaches and coaches are realizing this kid's really good. He's not just solid. He's a really good player. And so I think that the change there, that's why we're seeing that change. And then the only other guy I think played pretty well was Glad. I thought Glad had a pretty good game. Lewis busted his balls and ran all over the field, but he couldn't finish.
Dude, learn how to use a left.
Listen, I know.
It drives him up a wall. Instead of doing an easier tap in, players try to use the outside of their dominant foot. Learn how to use your opposite foot. You're a professional player. Learn how to use your opposite foot. That should have been a goal. It
looked like old school Jordan Morris 4 years ago or something, And but that's the thing with Lewis. He's a hard worker. He's going to make some good plays. But then he's also going to blunder and he's going to make some bad plays, and he's going to miss opportunities because of really his lack of technicality. He's not a great technical player. He's a fast player. He's an athletic player, but he's just not, he doesn't have all the tools. All right. Of course, we don't have on this team in general, we didn't have a lot of technicians in general. So Saucedo's one-footed as well. You know, we have a lot of players that are sort of one-footed on this team. And, you know, in some ways that might have been our downfall. You know, not a lot of technical.
Well, I mean, that is the bigger question. Instead of focusing heavily on, you know, why we didn't qualify, maybe we should focus more on why certain players may have been left off, more offensive-minded midfielders, somebody who could play that more tactical role.
Can I ask you a question? Was Uli Lanez hurt? Is he hurt? He's on this roster, right? And I believe he played in a game.
Must be hurt if he's not on the. Oh, I didn't look at the subs.
I'm gonna look him up because listen,
he's not on the sub list.
That must be injury because he would have been a real helper out there for us in a technical sense because we needed somebody like him today and we didn't have him. So that's got to be injury because he never really fully recovered from that injury in Holland that he got. So at Heerenveen. So I'm guessing that's just a continuation of the problem. I know he got a few minutes and then we haven't seen him since. But I tell you what, Brett, Alexi made a good point today in postgame. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but he's right.
You just lost us a couple subscribers.
I know, but he's right. Why is it with the relationship that U.S. soccer has with MLS that Atlanta refused to release any players?
I was going to bring that up too.
Any players. And let me go through the list of them. Miles Robinson, George Bello, Brooks Lennon, Emerson Hyman, who's 24 but would have qualified for this, if I'm not mistaken, because of the grandfathering. All four, at one point, as I understand it, were requested.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I didn't recall Hyman being included in the roster because I knew that the other three were, and then all of a sudden they were removed and they explained why. But yes. I don't remember Hyman being in there, but he could have been. Or maybe he requested but just wasn't added.
Well, didn't all three of the people that they did allow to go, they just went for practice and then were dumped, right? They made camp and then they were dumped.
Yeah.
They were taking off.
Yeah, I think that was before they took off to Mexico.
Yeah. Like the point being,
gather in Florida and go.
As I understand it, all four of those players were requested. They immediately said no to Hyman. And then they said, and the other ones, you know, you can have them for camp, but we're pulling them after camp. Now, I agree. All of those players are starters for Atlanta, and they want them in the Atlanta camp for preseason to get ready for the season because that's what they care about. They don't care about the Olympics. They care about Atlanta United, and that's their jobs. But come on, at least two of them, maybe one of them.
The potential of injury aside, going down to Mexico for a month and training at high altitude and then playing in a consistent of what for us right now was 4 games. I feel like that would have been a great way to prep and get ready for this season as far as getting back into the match fitness, getting sharper on the ball. And again, barring an injury, I feel like that would have been better than preseason. All those players are established already at Atlanta. It's not like they're entering a new atmosphere. So,
yeah, I mean, I get it, but I think there's something else going on there. And you would think a guy like Bocanegra would be sympathetic to playing for national teams. So I don't get it. I know the whole deal with getting Miles injured during an after game practice, and that they were really pissed off about that. But I understand, you know, they're coming out of a season that was really difficult. And they were finally smart enough to get rid of Frank de Boer. At least they're moving in the right direction now. But Yeah, maybe there's just too much going on. But then I could go down a list of players that could have made this team. James Sands and from NYCFC. I think he's one of the better defenders in the league, especially if you're talking about U23 or in this case U24 players. Keaton Parks, where was he from NYCFC? Did they say no too, or did Jason Christ just not call him up? Because Jason Christ is a great player. I mean, excuse me, Keaton Parks would have been a great player to have.
Yep.
Box to box. Caden Clark from the Red Bulls. What, he's just too young for this team? No, he's a great technical. It's the kind of player we're missing if Uli Lanez can't play. You can add a kid like that to add a spark. What about Chris Mueller? He's 24. Wouldn't he have qualified for this? You know, he's not with the national team. It would have been nice to have him with this team. There's a guy you can rely on. Mm-hmm. Brooks Lennon, we already talked about him. Jeremy Abobasi, I believe he's 24. And if we're talking about the 24, I guess it's technically if they would have qualified last year. So maybe the guys I'm mentioning who are 24 are too old, maybe technically. I don't know. But he should have maybe been on the list. But remember Frankie Amaya from Cincinnati, Mason Toy, Omer Fernandez, New York Red Bulls, another great player, Caden Cowell, San Jose Earthquakes. I mean, I can think of other people that could have made this team more technically gifted. Mason Toy wouldn't have. He's just more of an athlete. But a lot of the other players that I mentioned would have made this team more technically gifted. But it wasn't. So that's maybe what we could have done differently. I don't know what you would have done, but
I had mentioned in our pre Olympic qualifying podcast where we talked about the players being brought in and who was omitted. And I had mentioned that looking at the roster of this squad that we brought, it was purely a team that was just meant to grind out a result. And they weren't going to light anything on fire by any means, but they were just going to, blue collar work the midfield and pray that our attacking options can create something or whatever, So this could fall on Jason, in all honesty, on his decisions on who he brought, maybe the lack of having any form of game or interactions really for the last year, and being thrusted into you got to pick your squad, a month out, here you go, just thrown into it. Maybe he decided to go a little safe. I don't know. But I don't know. We definitely talked about the players that were omitted and
Cole Bassett
would have been different,
Cole Bassett, there's another one. Yeah. Cole Bassett. And you noticed how Honduras absolutely doubled down on Vines' side. He was shut off the whole game. Mm-hmm. Vines could not make a peep in this game. They shut his ass down. Everything had to go through Herrera on the right today. Everything.
I was gonna bring him up anyways. After his yellow card, I started to like his gameplay. Did he make mistakes after that? Sure, but he was definitely more aggressive getting into the attack. His final passes could definitely have used some work.
Yeah, Herrera, right?
Yeah. I thought his second half was much better than what I've seen.
Yeah, Vines. They just shut him down. They man marked him.
Yeah.
They man marked him all game. They had an extra player out on his side the whole game, so he could do nothing. And he did nothing. I mean, and we made no adjustments either. I mean, we tried really hard on that left side in the second half to get him the ball so he could do something. And no, they shut that shit down. They shifted an extra guy on that side, and there was no place to go on the left. So everything had to be switch fields, go right, go down the right wing. Because they left that open on purpose, because they'd rather have Herrera kicking, crosses than Vines. And they're smart. I would do the same thing. Anyhow, we're out of time for this segment, so we're going to bugger out. But I do want to just say, hey, it's not the end of the world. Drink a cocktail, and, we're going to have to move on from here. All right. We're going to move on to part 2, and we're going to talk about the United States men's national team in just a minute. Just go to the next show. All right, bye.